So I'm Jessica Mulligan. I'm a clinical dietitian at the Children's Neurological Development Center. It's such a pleasure to be invited here today, and it's just so nice to see so many familiar faces and also to meet lots of new people too. So I'm a dietitian at the CNDC, but I also do consulting for other pediatric neurologists in the state of Rhode Island, so Dr. Eunice and also Dr. Bill Brown as well. So today I just want to describe for you what the ketogenic diet is and some of the modified forms of the diet. There's more and more information coming out all the time just to really support dietary therapy for the treatment of epilepsy. I want to talk about patients who are appropriate and who are not appropriate. Not everyone is a good candidate for the diet. As a lot of the families might share with you, it's a tough diet to follow. There can be some complications. But mostly it's pretty strict and rigid to follow, and not every child can adhere to the diet, or even for the family circumstances that it's a good fit. And I also want to discuss some of the long-term effects of the diet. So we do have more and more patients staying on it long-term. So there's always concern when you're pushing so much fat, what are the effects to that child? When you're restricting carbohydrates, can that impact their growth? So we'll talk about that as well. So I'm going to focus mostly on the ketogenic diet. The ketogenic diet is more popular to be used. There's more data on it. There's more information. It also tends to have a little bit better results with the statistics as well. So I'm going to focus mostly on that. If at the end you feel you still have more questions about the modified forms of the diets, I'd be happy to answer them for you. It consists of a very high fat diet. So usually it's about 90% of the calories. So that's a lot. Most of us, get maybe 30 to 40% of our calories from fat. So this is 90%. So it's a real lot. It's very low in protein. We provide just enough so the child has enough to grow. But we still restrict it a little bit, and it's very, very low in carbohydrates. The classical ketogenic diet is a 4-to-1 ratio, and what that means is it's 4 parts fat to 1 part protein and carbohydrate combined. It uses fat for energy, so most of our bodies use carbohydrates for energy. Because you're restricting the carbohydrates, pushing fat, your body uses ketones, so it'll break the fat down into ketones, and it'll use the ketones for energy. And we believe it's from the ketones that this is what can help to eliminate or reduce the seizures. So a little bit of the history of the ketogenic diet. For those that aren't in epilepsy, they probably never have heard of it, but it's actually been around for a really long time, or a form of it. Actually, back to BC, 460 BC, Hippocrates, he would use fasting to cure epileptics, and they would fast children and adults for actually really long periods of time. For anyone that's a parent, I can't even imagine, keeping food away from my child or forcing them to fast. It must have just been torturous. And even in biblical references, there's a reference to Jesus healing a boy who was possessed, which he was having shakes, by fasting and prayer. And then in the 20s, Dr. Wilder from the Mayo Clinic, he developed the first ketogenic diet. So he started looking at the mechanism behind what's happening when a child is fasting or a person's fasting, and he tried to develop a diet to mimic fasting. And that's where the first ketogenic diet actually came about. And in the 60s, more and more anti-epileptic medications were taking the primary focus for seizure control. So the diet kind of went to the wayside during that time. And then in the 1990s, it started to emerge again. There was a famous producer from the Charlie Foundation. He really pursued the diet and had to really search hard to find the diet for an option for his child. He went to Johns Hopkins. And when his child went on the diet, he became seizure-free and had a miraculous turnaround in his life. So he has really made it his lifelong goal to promote the diet and promote education and awareness about the diet. It's a great website for those that haven't had a chance to look at it, the Charlie Foundation. It's a really wonderful foundation. He's promoted different movies. He's done different TV productions. I've gone to many of their different conferences that are just amazing. So since then, the ketogenic diet is becoming more and more readily used for treatment. Generally, if a child fails 2 or more medications, the ketogenic diet is then considered an option. And especially, if they can't be improved with medication, and they're not a surgical candidate, then the ketogenic diet is more appropriate. Sometimes the side effects of the anticonvulsants are just unbearable too, so then a child might be more of a candidate. And the child might have like a gastrointestinal bug, and where he doesn't eat for 3 days, and all of a sudden during that period of time their seizures go away. That can be a cue that maybe the diet would be appropriate for this child. Also, the easiest children to start on the diet are those who have a G-tube or are bottle fed. So I have started quite a few babies, infantile spasms. John Hopkins is using the ketogenic diet as a first-line approach over the ACTH and steroids. So we, unfortunately, we're not there yet in Rhode Island to use the ketogenic diet as a first-line approach for infantile spasms, but we are starting more and more babies. I started a baby that was about 8 weeks old recently and had really good success with that as well. So this just kind of goes through some of the conditions that the diet is appropriate for, or may be appropriate for. Myoclonic astatic epilepsy, Deuce syndrome, glucose transporter deficiency, infantile spasms, Rett syndrome, Dravet, and actually more and more of these conditions are being added to the list. They're doing research all the time on mouse models to figure out who is appropriate for the diet. And then it just kind of goes through again some of the contradictions. Actually, back to the other slide, I just wanted to mention too, I recently went to a conference, and they're actually using it more and more for children that have brain tumors, to shrink the tumors instead of doing surgery. They're using it for Alzheimer's, they're using it for inflammation disorders, ALS. I mean, it's remarkable. I really think in the next 20 years, dietary therapy is going to take off, particularly in the treatment for epilepsy and other disorders, neurological disorders. So some of the contraindications. Anyone that might have a fatty acid oxidation disorder is a definite no-no. You don't want to push fat on a child that can't break it down. So beta oxidation defects, carnitine deficiencies, pyruvate carboxylase deficiency, and an inability to maintain adequate nutrition. So certain children that might have autism or sensory disorders that are so picky. I've been consulted with this one child that has such horrible seizures, not responding to anything, didn't respond to the VNS, and I've been consulted so many times with this family, at least 4 times, and she only eats 3 foods. She eats potatoes, French fries, and chicken nuggets, and we can't make the diet work for her. As much as I want to, and the family wants to try to do it, she will not eat anything else. She is so inadequate with the amount of foods she'll take by mouth. So a child like that who's really limited in their eating, who has a lot of sensory issues, it may not be appropriate for them. Also too, the social structure of a family, might be a single parent that works a lot, that doesn't have the time, to really prepare all the food on a gram scale. It takes a lot of time, a lot of energy. It may not be appropriate for them socially, their social situation. And unfortunately, it could be a good option for them, but it's so much work that it doesn't always work. So the ketogenic diet, it is a hospital admission. It's a medical therapy. There can be some complications when they first go on the diet, dehydration, constipation, acidosis, severe nausea, vomiting, when you have that metabolic shift of using carbohydrates for energy to using fat for energy. That shift in the metabolism can cause some complications. So we do, at Hasbro, we do require it to be a hospital admission. There are other places in the country that don't do a hospital admission. They do it from home, but our policy is to do it from the hospital. There must be strict adherence to the diet. So if a child is going to be cheating, if the parents are not fully on board, grandparents are going to be sneaking foods, and really if the parents aren't on board, it's not going to work. If a child sneaks a cookie, it can throw the diet off and they can have a seizure. So it's, that it really is important that they follow the diet to the strictest degree. Everything is weighed on a gram scale, so it's a lot of work, as our families can attest to, but the results can be amazing. There's lab work that's involved, monitoring the urine or blood ketones, supplementations, and generally they're on the diet for 2 to 3 years, and then we start to wean slowly. And that is adjusted based on the child. So if they have had really, really severe seizures, we might go more slowly. We had one child we did 6 months. We slowly weaned them. So that's really individualized based on the child too. And I have one boy who's been on the diet for 16 years, and he's remarkable. He's had no long-term effects. He is very high functioning and he loves his diet, and he does not want to come off it. Mom does not want to come off it. We've slowly weaned him so to add more carbohydrates, add more protein in. So he's on about a 2-to-1 ratio right now, but they don't really want to come off. Medication has not done the trick for him. He still has about 1 grand mal per month, where he was having about 4 to 5 per day. So it's really improved his quality of life. So he wants to stay on it, and we just continue to monitor him, his cholesterol, his liver panels. We do a regular vitamin mineral workup every year, and his cholesterol is beautiful, so it's pretty amazing. It does require frequent clinic visits with myself and the neurologist, so we try to combine them together if possible, so that you're not seeing, having to come more frequently. So generally it's 1 week after you start the diet, then at 3 months, and then it's every 6 months. If for some reason, things need to be tweaked a little bit more, we might have you come back in, but I try to do all of it by phone or by email too. Just, we have busy lives, and I try to really adapt to that. The modified Atkins diet. So this is a form of the ketogenic diet. It's carbohydrate restricting, so it tends to be more strict in the first month. You do 10 grams of carbohydrate, and then if they do well on that, they tolerate it okay, you increase to 20 grams. They do carbohydrate count, and you encourage fats and proteins. So there's no use of a gram scale, no hospital admission. It's a lot more flexibility. You do measure ketones, and generally it's just from the urine. You want the child to be making small to low ketones in their urine. It does still require lab work, monitoring the ketones, and vitamin and mineral supplementation. So it does allow a lot more flexibility. The modified forms of the diet have just about as good a success as the ketogenic diet, but the ketogenic diet does have a little bit more success with seizure control. The low glycemic diet, this is the most liberal form of the diet. The principles of this is 40 to 60 grams of carbohydrates. This is about 10% of the calories. They carbohydrate count. They choose foods that are less than 50 on the glycemic index. So they have a little book they have to look up, to see what the foods are and what the number is for the glycemic index. So there's kind of 2 parts of it: carbohydrate counting, and then making sure the glycemic index is less than 50. And then the idea behind this one is keeping blood sugar stable, so that it's not having these highs and lows. And I'm not really sure if it's ketones or blood sugar. Maybe it's a combination of both. But we do tend to see good seizure control with this diet as well. There's no hospital admission, no weighing of the food. It does require the lab work and vitamin supplementation as well. There is a handout too, just a comparison. We can even put it at the back for later or pass it around. I'm kind of a visual learner, and I like this table because it shows each of the diets and compares them. So it's a lot of information to take in today, and I think it's kind of nice to actually look at them on a table. So on the ketogenic diet, it's hard to kind of imagine what it would actually look like. So I wanted to kind of put together a sample menu for you. So at breakfast, a sample menu might be some kind of egg. Generally it's eggs. So it could be in the quiche with some kind of meat, so sausage, bacon. We try to encourage kids to drink lots of cream. If they don't do the cream, then we try to add it in other forms: butter, mayonnaise, sour cream. For lunch, it might be some kind of, again, meat. We try to push the meat. take away the carbohydrates, so we use like a lettuce wrap with some kind of fat, mayonnaise, butter. They can have a sugar-free Jell-O. Again, the cream is providing the fat that they need. For dinner, we still, we try to choose foods that kids like to eat. So hot dogs are a big favorite for kids, so we use hot dogs a lot. Kids like to dip, so we try to do some kind of really high fatty dip. And then some kind of vegetable, and usually a fruit with cream again. And then for a snack, we might do like a keto eggnog or nuts, something like that. More bacon, more sausage, high fat meat. And all the foods have to be carefully weighed on a gram scale. So I wanted to show you what a sample, this would be a meal at a 1200 level, calories at a 4-to-1 ratio. So this is a hot dog mayo with ranch, strawberries, and cream. So you can kind of see this is the weight in the grams, and this is what the recipe would look like. So they have to weigh each individual thing out and be very precise. There's a lot of, using spatulas, scraping every little bit of fat to make sure that they get it, because that can throw the ratio off. So it's a lot of work. This is a breakfast, a ketogenic crepe you can make. We try to make it fun, try to make it interesting, individualize it to each of the children's preferences. There's a stir fry it's a shirataki noodle, so it's like a soy noodle. Ketogenic pizza, so this is actually the large pepperoni. And then you put the mozzarella cheese, a little bit of sauce, and then you can add more pepperoni on it, or some vegetables. So pizza's a really hard thing for kids to not have, so we try to be creative and try to think of ketogenic pizzas that we can make for them. There are some new products that have come out on the market too, which is like a keto flour that families can use to make bread, and it's just a high-fat flour with a leavening agent, or you can use like almond flour, coconut flour, things like that too. So for some families that are really creative, you can really make it fun and make it work for the child. Lots of salads, adding eggs, meat, some kind of fat would be the dressing, nuts, avocado. So does the ketogenic diet work? Statistic-wise, those that are about seizure-free are about 7%. Those about 20% have a greater than 90% reduction. 50 to 90% reduction would be about 23%, and about 5% have a less than 50% reduction. So those that don't have like a less than 25% reduction, we don't keep them on the diet. Generally, it's about 3 months. We do a trial. If they don't succeed with the diet, or it's just too hard for the family, then we stop it at 3 months. I have had some a few kids that don't respond at all, and it's so hard. It's so heartbreaking, because at that point, the medication hasn't really worked for them, and there's not a whole lot of options. But the success that they've had, it's been amazing to see these children's lives change, these families' lives change, and I think the best part of today will be to hear people's stories, share about that. And I feel I have the best job, because I really get to use food as medicine. And there's not too many jobs where you can do that and you can change people's lives. And it's amazing. It's so much work, but it's so worth it when it works. So let's see. So is all that fat safe? It's a huge amount of fat. But really what they show is we do cholesterol ahead of time. Then we're checking it every 6 months. If they're on it long term, then we're continuing to check it every 6 months. And it may elevate a little bit. We do see that come up a slight amount. But once they go off the diet, it goes right back to normal, and I have seen that. With this boy who's been on the diet long term, his cholesterol is perfectly normal. I don't really understand that, but it is. And it does tend to return to normal after. So they're not seeing any long-term effects of being on the diet cholesterol-wise. With growth, so we're restricting protein. We give just enough so they're growing. We monitor their growth so closely. But it does show that height-wise, it does affect them a little bit. So they might not grow quite as tall or as rapidly, and you can kind of see it on the growth chart. It might fall off a little bit, but it does tend to catch up after. So we do see that catch up. And actually the boy who's been on it, he's 21 now. and he's like 5'11", you know, so obviously it hasn't stunted his growth. He's a very big boy, big man, I should say. That's so cute. Every time I see him, he hugs me and he lays his head right on my chest, you know. He's just so sweet. Oh, I love him. So, you know, we don't really see it affect it long term, which is good. And they are finding, you know, more and more people are staying on it long term because it doesn't have long term effects that we originally thought it would have. If you want to learn more, if you think that the diet may be a good option for your child, the best thing to do, I would say first, is just to do a little research on your own. There's some great books out there that you can get from the library. The Charlie Foundation is a great website where you can easily read more information, read people's stories, and, you know, learn a little bit more about it. The Matthews Friends is a British website, which is great too. And then if you still think it might be a good fit, ask your neurologist. That's the first place to start. You know, they know your child the best with their seizures. See if it is an option. If they think it is an option, then your pediatrician needs to send a referral. And I did put my fax number there. That's where the referral should be sent. I do have cards too if anyone wants to talk more about it too. And then that referral gets sent to me and we'll make a nutrition appointment and discuss, you know, to see if it is a good fit. So I think this maybe now, I can maybe take some questions, or if we want to do the panel and then do questions, I don't know.
We'll get the panel up.
Yeah, okay.
Great.